Hello students, today we are going to discuss about second topic of this chapter, and that is diversity in living world. So first of all, let me see what is a diversity. Okay, so if we define the number and the types of organism present on the earth is referred as a biodiversity. Okay, so this is the definition. What is a biodiversity? It is the number and the types of organisms present on the earth, total number of organisms present on the earth, referred to as a biodiversity. So this is whole definition about the biodiversity. So students, I am not just satisfied with the definition of a biodiversity. So let me see the video of a biodiversity. So enjoy this video.
Biodiversity is a term that represents the total variety of all life on Earth. That's a big thing to sum up. Thousands of different wild habitats, millions of different species, billions of different individuals, and the trillions of different characteristics they all have. The total biodiversity of our planet is immense. Which is a good thing, because the more biodiversity, the more secure all life on Earth is, including ourselves. Only when life is at its most varied, vigorous, biodiverse, can we hope to thrive. We may not know it, but we need towering forests across 1/3 of the land surface to lock away carbon and keep the climate stable. We need millions of pollinators and billions of soil organisms and megatons of plankton to keep the food we eat in supply. We need strange plants deep in jungles to create our medicines, and coral reefs and mangrove swamps to protect the coasts we depend upon. Our planet's biodiversity provides all the things we need for free. But it will only do so if there's lots of it, and at the moment it's under attack. In the last 50 years, our activities have dramatically reduced biodiversity across the globe. We've snuffed out habitats, reduced populations of wild animals by 60%, and even driven whole species extinct. The number of lions in Africa has dropped by 65%. The number of individual flying insects in Europe has dropped by 75%. The number of bluefin tuna in the Pacific has dropped by 95%. Biodiversity is dropping everywhere and fast. This is catastrophic for nature and therefore ourselves. We talk about climate change a lot, but biodiversity loss is as important an issue. How do we stop this loss of life? How do we ensure that biodiversity, our planet's vital statistic, begins to increase again? In fact, we already know exactly what to do.
Fueled by sunlight and rain, tropical rainforests are some of the most diverse, energy-rich ecosystems on the planet. A single hectare of rainforest, like this one in Peru, may contain over 50,000 species, housing a vast, interactive network of plants, animals, and insects. At the California Academy of Sciences, our mission is to explore, explain, and sustain tropical rainforests. Scientists like Michelle Troutwine are experts in these efforts, conducting research to help us better understand the structure and diversity of rainforest ecosystems. Entering a tropical rainforest, we find vertical layers of life, each with its own unique structure and composition. The forest floor receives very little sunlight. It is a hot, humid place where animals like leafcutter ants spend their time foraging for food. Just above the floor is a thick layer of shrubs, small trees, and flowering plants. Here in the rainforest understory, you find amphibians, like the poison dart frog, whose toxic skin protects it from predators. Rising higher, we find a bright, connected layer of tree branches and leaves. The canopy contains a wide variety of species, including squirrel monkeys who travel and feed in large social groups. Breaking through, we enter the emergent layer, an open space containing only the highest treetop. Here we find camouflaged insects called katydids, who feed on young, tender leaves. Ecological communities tend to be more stable and resilient to change. This means a more diverse tropical rainforest is better able to respond to disturbances like deforestation and climate change. Even with these findings, there are still many unanswered questions about tropical rainforests and the species that inhabit them.
Number of species described on the earth is a 1.7 to 1.8 million till that. Now, if we want to study about the diversity in the living world, then very useful terminology is a taxonomy. So let me understand what is a taxonomy. It is the study of identification, means is the study of biodiversity in form of identification, classification and nomenclature of organism. Okay, so these all steps together is called taxonomy. Okay, so it includes the study of identification, classification and nomenclature of organism, and all these together called taxonomy. Another useful term is a systematics. Okay, so what is a systematic? Systematic is come from the systema, and that is a Latin word that means a systematic arrangement. Okay, so it will deal with the evolutionary relationship between the organism. So specifically these science of biology is dealing with the evolutionary relationship between the organisms. The first scientist who have written the book according to the biodiversity, and he had arranged all the biodiversity, all the organism in systematic way. Okay, and he had written one book called Systema Naturae. Okay, here you can see he had classified the organism in the classes, orders and genera, species. Okay, in general to particular. Okay, and he had written Systema Naturae type of book in 1735. Okay, and afterward all the sciences related to the classification is evolved. Okay, so he also considered as a father of classification. So as we have defined taxonomy, we have learned that taxonomy include classification, identification and nomenclature. Okay, so these all are basic processes of any taxonomy, and that include characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature of organism. So first of all, let me discuss about characterization. What is the process of characterization? So it is the understanding of characters. Okay, which type of characters present in the organism? It is understanding. Okay, so it is the understanding of a character of an organism, such as external. Two type of character may be there in the organism: external characters and internal structures. Okay, so these science or these step include understanding of a character of an organism, such as external and internal structure, structure of a cell. Okay, and then developmental processes, ecological information. So these steps include these all processes in which external and internal structure will be studied, then structure of cell will be studied. Okay, then development process will be studied, and after that ecological information will be gathered. Step of a taxonomy, or a second basic process of a taxonomy, is identification. We have to identify according to the character present on that particular organism. So it is the correct description of the organism so that the naming is possible. We have to identify first. Okay, very basically we can say that we can identify whether it is plant or animal first. Okay, so based on the description, correct description, we can consider plant as a plant and animal as an animal. Okay, we cannot confuse in between that. Okay, so we have to correct description of the organism, whether it is a plant or an animal. Okay, this step is called identification. Okay, so that the naming is possible, and after that only we can give the names. Okay, so these steps play very important role for nomenclature. That is the next process. Okay, so it is the correct description of organism so that the naming is possible. So identification is playing very important role during the process of taxonomy. After characterization and the identification of organism, next step will be classification. According to the characterization and identification, we can classify the organism. So what is a classification? Classification is very general thing. Okay, we are doing it in the home also. We can can classify the kitchen parts, okay, then in our living room and all that, bedroom and all that. Okay, so this is very common thing, we are doing it in the daily life also. So what is the classification? If you are visiting any mall also, okay, so you can also see or observe some type of a classification over there also. Okay, so it is the grouping of a same characteristic containing organism into a convenient categories. Okay, and that convenient categories in this field is called taxa. Okay, and it is totally based on characters. So classification will only done after the characterization and identification process. Okay, so what is a classification? It is the grouping of organism into convenient category, and these convenient categories are called taxa. Okay, so here you can see prokaryotes, okay, plants, these all are taxa. Okay, convenient categories. So after you have just characterized the organism, then identified the organism, whether it is prokaryote, plants, animal, fungi, or a protistas. Okay, so accordingly you have classified the organism. So characterization, identification, and then classification. Now, final step of any taxonomy is a nomenclature, to give name of an organism. Okay, so here you can see this is the mango. In general term, we are calling it as a mango, and this is honeybee. Okay, but in the scientific word, we have to give them a scientific name. Okay, to avoid any confusion. Okay, so here you can see Mangifera indica name is given to this particular organism, and that is a mango. Okay, and here this is honeybee, and the scientific name for the honeybee is the Apis indica. So this type of name is given, that is the scientific naming is called nomenclature. Okay, so it is the standardization of names of organism such that then organism is known by the same name all over the world. Why scientific name is very important? Because it is the name which is given by the scientific society, and it is given all over the world in the same direction. Okay, so if I'm talking about this honeybee, the name of the scientific name of the honeybee will be Apis indica in each part of the world. So it will be avoid the confusion. The system of a naming with two component. Okay, as I told you, Apis indica. So two components are there. If I talking about mango, this is a Mangifera indica. So that is having also two component, two words. Okay, so what this two name is indicating? Let me discuss that. The system of a naming with the two component is called binomial nomenclature. Okay, such a two-word name is called binomial nomenclature, and it is proposed firstly by the Linnaeus. Okay, so Linnaeus is also considered as the father of a nomenclature, because worldwide this nomenclature system, binomial nomenclature system, is accepted worldwide, and that's why Linnaeus is considered as a father of a nomenclature. Now let me discuss more about the nomenclature. So suppose you can understand, you can divide the organism in two groups mainly. Okay, that is botany related animals and plant, that is plant related organisms, and animal related organisms. Okay, so we can divide the organism in two groups, botanical and zoological. Okay, animal related organisms are included in the zoological. Okay, so names are also of two kinds. Okay, this is a botanical name and zoological name. And if you are giving name as a botanical name, suppose you are identified or characterize the plant. Okay, and accordingly you have to give the name. Then you have to give this plant name according to the rules of ICBN, and that is International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. So if you want to give the name or a nomenclature, that is a binomial nomenclature given by the Linnaeus, then you have to follow rules of ICBN. So be very clear about this full form. Okay, what is the ICBN? That is a International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. In short, it is called ICBN. Okay, this is according to the botanical names. And next organism type is a zoological organisms. Okay, so which include a zoological name. And if you are going to give about the name, about the zoological name of the animal, then you have to follow this classification or a nomenclature system. That is ICZN, that is International Code for Zoological Nomenclature. So remember these two terms. Okay, what is the ICBN and what is the ICZN? So here two examples are given. This is a mango. A scientific name for the mango is Mangifera indica, and here you can see this is tiger. Okay, so scientific name for a tiger is Panthera tigris. You have to remember these two names also. Now let me discuss about some universal rules of a binomial nomenclature. Okay, these rules are followed in worldwide. Okay, so that's why it is universal rules. So whenever any scientist of any corner of the world, whenever it give nomenclature to any organism, these rules must be followed. Okay, so here you can see rules. Okay, so scientific names are always Latin or a Latinized and written in a italic form. You know very well what is italic form. You have already typed in the computer. At that time I button is given on the Word document. Okay, so that is italic form. When handwritten, if suppose you are not typing in the computer, if you are typing in the computer, at that time you have to write in the italic form. Okay, and if you are not typing, but if you are writing by using handwritten notes, okay, so at that time you just have to underline separately. Suppose this part you have to underline separately. Here you can see that is a Mangifera, so you have to underline this part, this word separately, and indica you have to underline this separately. You cannot continue the line like this. Okay, you cannot continue line like this. You have to line between under these word separately and these word separately. Okay, so this is a rule. So if you are handwritten, then you have to underline. If you are typing, then it must be italic. Okay, this is the first rule. Second rule, the first word is always genus name. Okay, so what is this indicating? This indicating the genus, that is a generic name. So first name, first word is a generic name, that is a genus name. Okay, and the second word is always a species name. So indica indicating the species name. That is also called specific epithet. Okay, so be very clear why this is two names. Okay, first name will indicate genus of the organism and second name will indicate a species of the organism. Okay, so it is very clear to you. So now next rule, genus name always start with the capital letter. Here you can see the example. Okay, so genus name, first character, first letter of the genus is always capital. Okay, and species name will always in small letters, no capital letters. So in whole name, you can see only one letter will be capital, that is the first letter of a genus. Okay, rest other will be small letters. This is the rule. Okay, now next rule, that is the author's name. Okay, whoever the name written the name is the author's name in abbreviated form. You can see linear. Suppose linears are in the, isolated this one. So name is Lin. Okay, this is a short form, abbreviated form. So appears at the end of the biological name. Okay, so first name is always genus, then species. Okay, and then author name. And suppose some organism may have subspecies. Okay, suppose in the case of a human having a Homo as a genus, sapiens as the species, and human also have subspecies. So we are Homo sapiens sapiens. Okay, so after species you have to write subspecies if it is there. Okay, otherwise you should write the directly you can write the author's name. It's for the here written. Okay, so Homo is a genus, the genus name, then sapiens is the species name, and we, if we are talking about human, okay, then we have another very important terminology, and that is a subspecies, and that is Homo sapiens sapiens. Okay, and finally you have to write the author's name. Okay, just like here, Mangifera indica, Lin. Mangifera indicating the genus name, indica indicating the species name, and finally it is the Lin, that is the author's name. Okay, so these all are the rules and you have to follow whenever you write them. So this is your homework for today's lecture, and before we finish this lecture, let me summarize whole topic by using one animation video. So look at this video.
The world consists of both the living and the non-living. But how do we segregate the two? We can do so by looking out for certain characteristics associated with living organisms. However, these characteristics can be definitive or non-definitive. One such characteristic is growth. living organisms, whether multicellular or unicellular, grow due to cell division. However, cell division affects these organisms differently. In a multicellular organism, cell division results in an increase in mass, whereas in a unicellular organism like amoeba, it leads to the formation of two new organisms. Interestingly, plants grow through cell division throughout their lifespan, while animals, including humans, grow up to a certain age. After that, cell division occurs only when the body has to replace lost cells in certain tissues. However, everything that grows cannot be said to be a living organism. Take the example of a rock that will grow in size if sand gets deposited over it. However, this growth is external. On the contrary, growth in living organisms is internal. Growth is, thus, a characteristic feature of living organisms, though it is a non-definitive one. Reproduction is another important characteristic of living organisms. In unicellular organisms, reproduction and growth are synonymous, as both lead to an increase in the number of cells. This is not the case with multicellular organisms, where reproduction leads to the creation of an offspring. These organisms reproduce either sexually or asexually. Sexual reproduction can be seen in higher organisms like man and animals. Asexual reproduction can be seen in lower organisms through budding as seen in yeast, or through fragmentation as observed in flatworm. However, certain organisms, such as sterile worker bees, are not capable of reproducing. But that doesn't mean they are non-living. Reproduction is therefore not a definitive characteristic of the living. Metabolism is also a characteristic of living organisms. We know that organisms are made up of chemicals. These chemicals are constantly produced in living beings and converted into biomolecules. These conversions are called chemical or metabolic reactions. The sum total of all such reactions is known as metabolism. It is interesting to note that such chemical reactions can also be imitated in a laboratory. However, such isolated reactions taking place in vitro are not considered living organisms, but are classified as living reactions. We can therefore state that metabolism is a definitive feature of living organisms. Cellular organization is another important characteristic of living organisms. Such organization is not observed in the non-living, and hence, cellular organization is also a definitive feature in all life forms. Consciousness is another feature associated with living organisms. We know that all living organisms sense and respond to environmental stimuli such as light, water, and temperature. For instance, a sunflower always faces the sun. Humans too respond to environmental stimuli and are aware of their surroundings and themselves. For instance, in winters, they wear woolens to keep their bodies warm. Non-living objects don't respond to external stimuli. Consciousness is therefore another definitive characteristic of a living being. Thus, we can say that metabolism, cellular organization, and consciousness are the three definitive characteristics of living organisms. Earth is a diverse planet with millions of different types of fungi, plants, microorganisms, and animals. The range and diversity of living organisms increases as we increase the area of our observation. Each different kind of plant, animal, or organism represents a species. In other words, species is a group of similar individuals sharing a common gene pool and interbreeding freely, producing fertile progeny. Today, there are about 1.7 to 1.8 million species known to us, and this number is ever increasing as we explore new areas along with the old ones. The number and types of living organisms on the earth is referred to as biodiversity. It is common to find living organisms being known by different local names in different parts of the world. To avoid this confusion, the name of a living organism must be standardized such that it is known by the same name the world over. This process is known as nomenclature. However, to name an organism, we need to know its correct description and to what organism the name is attached to. This is known as identification. To make the process of identification easier, scientists have assigned a scientific or biological name to every known organism. The scientific names for plants are based on the principles and criteria given in the International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, or ICBN, and for animals in the International Code for Zoological Nomenclature, or ICZN. The procedures to assign a scientific name to an organism have been agreed upon by scientists and biologists all over the world. Scientific names help avoid ambiguity as each organism has just one name. However, certain universal rules are followed while providing a scientific name to a known organism. For example, the scientific name for the sacred fig, commonly known as the peepal tree in India, is Ficus religiosa. Here, as you can see, the scientific name has two components: the generic name and the specific epithet. Ficus represents the genus or the generic name, while religiosa denotes the specific epithet. This system of representing a name with two components is called binomial nomenclature and was devised by Carolus Linnaeus, also known as the father of modern taxonomy. Sometimes, the name of the author who first described the species is written at the end of the specific epithet. For example, in Ficus religiosa Linn, Linn is the abbreviated name for Linnaeus. Moreover, scientific or biological names are generally in Latin or derived from Latin, irrespective of the origin of the organism. Also, when a scientific name is handwritten, both the words in the name are underlined separately, whereas when printed, it is in italics to indicate its Latin origin. Finally, the first word of the genus starts with a capital letter, and the specific epithet starts with a small letter. Apart from assigning scientific names to living organisms, they must be aptly organized for easy study. The process of grouping anything into convenient categories based on easily observable characters is known as classification. For example, plants, animals, roses, flowers, and dogs are groups that we can easily recognize. Each group has specific characteristics and are convenient categories that help us to study organisms. The scientific term given for these categories is taxa. Here, each of the groups, namely mango trees, apple trees, neem trees, cats and dogs, are all taxa. However, cat is a mammal, and all mammals come under animals. Therefore, a cat, mammals, and animals represent taxa at different levels. This process of classifying living organisms into different taxa based on their characteristics is called taxonomy. Taxonomy isn't new to humans. For ages, humans have been interested in knowing about different types of organisms and the relationships among them. This branch of study is known as systematics, which means systematic arrangement of organisms. However, today, systematics also includes the identification, classification, nomenclature, as well as evolutionary relationships among organisms. Therefore, in this diverse world, it is important to classify and name living organisms for their easy identification and study.
In next lecture, we will learn about taxonomic categories. Until that, goodbye.